can't believe they locked me up for driving on a sidewalk.
Come on, Eddie, get in!
It was just a couple of miles. I'll drive.
But I want to drive.
The first time you saw a cartoon character pick up a real object, your brain probably short-circuited. Who Framed Roger Rabbit crashed into theaters on June 22nd, 1988, and made the impossible look effortless, proving that toons and humans could share the same screen without looking like cheap garbage pasted together in someone's garage.
I always knew I'd get it in Toontown.
Behind you!
Drop it, lady!
I just saved your life and you still don't trust me?
Robert Zemeckis directed a film noir where cartoon characters weren't just entertainment, they were second-class citizens living in segregated Toontown, working menial jobs, and getting framed for crimes they didn't commit. Bob Hoskins played Eddie Valiant, a bitter detective who hated toons until one particular rabbit dragged him into conspiracy and redemption. Christopher Lloyd was Judge Doom, proving that the scariest villains hide behind painted smiles. And Charles Fleischer voiced Roger with such manic energy that kids loved the slapstick, while adults appreciated the noir underneath. The film cost $70 million, an astronomical figure for 1988, and became a technical achievement that animation historians still study today. It grossed $329 million worldwide, won 4 Academy Awards, and created characters so iconic that Disney built an entire section of their theme parks around them. But behind every perfectly synchronized interaction between cartoon and reality was pain, technological nightmares, animation sweatshops, and deals with competing studios that should have been impossible. Hit that like button, subscribe for more Hollywood deep dives, and let's investigate 15 wild facts about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, starting with number 15. Number 15, Disney had to pay Warner Brothers per second of screen time for Bugs Bunny. Here's the thing about Roger Rabbit. The film required characters from multiple competing animation studios to appear together. Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, Betty Boop, Droopy Dog, all owned by different companies who'd spent decades actively hating each other. Getting Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, and Fleischer Studios to cooperate should have been impossible. Robert Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg spent months negotiating deals with every studio that owned classic cartoon characters. Each studio wanted creative approval, equal screen time for their characters, and guarantees that their properties wouldn't be depicted negatively. Warner Brothers in particular drove hard bargains because they knew Disney desperately needed Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. The most contentious negotiation involved Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny. Warner Brothers would only allow Bugs to appear if he received exactly equal screen time with Mickey, down to the frame. The contract specified that if Mickey appeared for 5 seconds and 14 frames, Bugs had to appear for exactly 5 seconds and 14 frames. Not approximate, exact. So, Zemeckis created the parachute scene where Mickey and Bugs fall together, sharing the screen for identical durations. Editors literally counted frames to ensure contractual compliance. The same deal applied to Donald Duck and Daffy Duck's piano dueling scene.
This means war.
Both characters receiving precisely matched screen time. Here's the beautiful irony. The corporate warfare that nearly prevented the film from existing created one of cinema's most magical moments. Seeing rival studio characters interact on screen was unprecedented, and it only happened because lawyers counted every single frame. Number 14. Bob Hoskins performed opposite nothing and punched himself in the face repeatedly. Bob Hoskins spent over a year filming Who Framed Roger Rabbit acting opposite empty air. Every scene with Roger, Jessica, or any toon required Hoskins to perform alone, reacting to nothing, pretending to be yanked around by invisible forces, and maintaining eye contact with marks on sticks. Director Robert Zemeckis would describe what the cartoons were doing while Hoskins performed. Puppeteers operated props that Roger would supposedly be holding, stand-ins crouched off camera marking where toons would appear later. But Hoskins had to imagine everything and sell the reality of interacting with characters that wouldn't exist until months after he finished filming. The physical demands were brutal. The scene where Roger supposedly slams Eddie's head against the steering wheel, Hoskins did that to himself, repeatedly, take after take. The moments where Roger grabs Eddie and shakes him, Hoskins created those movements by violently jerking his own body around on wires. Hoskins later told interviewers he'd arrive home covered in bruises from scenes where he essentially beat himself up to create the illusion of cartoon violence. His wife reportedly asked if he was okay because he looked like he'd been in actual fights. The shoot lasted so long and required such intense concentration that Hoskins admitted seeing cartoon rabbits in his peripheral vision during the production. Whether that was psychological strain or just his brain filling in gaps after months of pretending, he never quite clarified. Number 13, Richard Williams, ran an animation sweatshop and animators literally collapsed. Who Framed Roger Rabbit required over 1,000 effects, shots combining live action with hand-drawn animation. Each shot needed cartoon characters to move realistically within physical spaces, interact with real objects, cast shadows, and maintain consistent lighting. The technical complexity was unprecedented, and animation director Richard Williams pushed his crew to the breaking point to meet deadlines. Williams assembled a team of over 300 animators working in Camden Town, London. The standard schedule was 6 days a week, 14-hour days minimum, hand-drawing every frame of animation that would be composited with live-action footage. No computers, no shortcuts, just pencil and paper, and exhausted artists racing against impossible deadlines.
It was very clear what he wanted. And I said to him early on, I said, look, I'll be your pencil. You know what you want to do. I'm your living pencil.
Animator Andreas Deja later described the working conditions as brutal. Sleep deprivation was normalized. Taking breaks was discouraged. Williams ran the studio with an intensity that bordered on abusive, demanding perfection, while refusing to extend deadlines. Multiple animators have confirmed in interviews that people literally fainted from exhaustion during the final months. The process consumed 2 full years. Each second of finished animation required roughly 24 individual drawings. A 10-second scene with multiple toon characters could require over 500 drawings, each needing to be precisely aligned with the live-action plate, checked for consistency, colored, and photographed. They finished just days before the absolute final deadline for theatrical release. If anything had gone wrong in those final days, Disney would have had to delay the premiere. Here's the grim achievement. The animation that looks so effortless and joyful on screen represents 2 years of documented human suffering in a London studio. The magic required misery, and dozens of animators still talk about those 2 years as the hardest work of their careers. Number 12, Jessica Rabbit's wardrobe malfunction was real, and Disney recalled thousands of VHS tapes. Jessica Rabbit's design pushed every boundary Disney would allow, but one scene went too far entirely by accident. In the sequence where Jessica is thrown from Benny the Cab and tumbles across the street, her dress flies up for several frames. And if you pause the VHS at exactly the right moment, it appeared Jessica wasn't wearing anything underneath. This wasn't discovered until after the film had been in theaters for months and the VHS release had sold hundreds of thousands of copies. A vigilant parent noticed it, complained to Disney, and suddenly the company faced a potential scandal involving animated nudity in a family film. Disney's response was immediate and expensive. They issued a voluntary recall of the initial VHS release, offering to replace copies with a corrected version where the offending frames had been digitally painted over. The recall cost Disney millions in replacement costs and logistics. The controversy generated massive publicity. News outlets ran stories about the Jessica Rabbit scandal.
I hit him on the head with a frying pan and put him in the trunk so he wouldn't get hurt.
Makes perfect sense.
We're obviously not going anywhere in my car. Let's take yours.
Suddenly, everyone wanted to see what the fuss was about. And the film's VHS sales actually increased after the recall because collectors wanted the uncorrected version. Whether the original frames were an animation error or deliberate provocation remains disputed. Some animators claim it was an honest mistake in the rush to complete thousands of frames. Others suggest it was a deliberate Easter egg that got caught. Here's the perfect irony. The wardrobe malfunction that cost Disney millions in recall expenses generated tens of millions in additional publicity and sales. Jessica Rabbit's accidental exposure became one of the most profitable animation errors in history. Number 11, Charles Fleischer, wore a Roger Rabbit costume on set and refused to break character. Charles Fleischer didn't just voice Roger Rabbit in a recording booth. He performed on set, in full costume, next to Bob Hoskins during filming. This wasn't method acting, it was Fleischer's solution to a timing problem that became a production legend. Early in filming, Fleischer recorded Rogers' dialogue traditionally in a studio. When Hoskins acted against those pre-recorded lines, the timing felt wrong. Hoskins couldn't react naturally to dialogue that didn't match the physical chaos of the scenes. Fleischer proposed performing live on set, so Hoskins would have real timing to react to. Zemeckis agreed. Fleischer showed up wearing a full Roger Rabbit costume he'd commissioned himself, complete with ears, tail, and red overalls. He stood next to Hoskins during takes and performed Roger's lines with full physical commitment. Crew members have confirmed in interviews that Fleischer stayed in character between takes, maintaining Roger's manic energy for entire shooting days. Production photographs show Fleischer in the rabbit costume doing pratfalls during breaks while Hoskins tried to rest. The approach worked. Hoskins' reactions to Fleischer's live performance were significantly more authentic than anything captured with pre-recorded dialogue.
Well, I've just approached this like I'd approach any role. I don't consider this to be a voiceover. If anything, it had to be categorized, it's off-camera acting.
The timing improved dramatically, and Fleischer's physical presence gave Hoskins something concrete to play against, even though the actual rabbit would be added later. Here's the beautiful absurdity. One of cinema's most technically sophisticated achievements required a voice actor in a homemade rabbit costume jumping around like a lunatic on a professional film set. The high-tech solution was aggressively low-tech. Number 10, Judge Doom's death scene caused panic in theaters and parents demanded refunds. Judge Doom's reveal and death remains one of the most disturbing sequences ever approved for a PG rating. When Doom gets flattened by a steamroller, then re-inflates himself with squeaking balloon sounds while revealing glowing red cartoon eyes and a high-pitched voice. Children in theaters across America started screaming and crying. Christopher Lloyd's performance transformed from menacing human to absolutely terrifying toon in that moment. The combination of Lloyd's bulging cartoon eyes, the grotesque voice, and the body horror of watching him inflate created genuine nightmare fuel that kids were completely unprepared for. Theater managers reported the chaos and written complaints to Disney. Parents walked out mid-film with hysterical children. Multiple theaters received demands for ticket refunds specifically because of the Doom death sequence. Letters poured into Disney headquarters from angry parents who felt the scene was inappropriately traumatic. For a film marketed to families. The MPAA received formal challenges to the PG rating after theatrical release, with parents groups arguing the film should have been rated PG-13. Disney fought the challenges, arguing the rating was appropriate and refusing to edit the scene for home video release. The controversy generated enormous publicity. News coverage of the terrifying scene actually drove more families to theaters because parents wanted to judge for themselves. Box office numbers increased rather than decreased. Here's the twisted marketing success. The scene that traumatized children became one of the film's most memorable moments and actually sold more tickets. What should have been a ratings disaster became a promotional asset. Number 9, Bob Hoskins destroyed his back, doing wire work and required surgery. The physical demands of Who Framed Roger Rabbit seriously injured Bob Hoskins. Every scene where Roger supposedly grabbed Eddie, threw him around, or yanked him in different directions required Hoskins to create those movements himself, while attached to wires and harnesses that weren't designed for the strain he put on them. The scene where Roger drags Eddie out of the ink and paint club required Hoskins to throw himself backward repeatedly, while making it look like an invisible rabbit was pulling him. Take after take, day after day, Hoskins jerked his own body around on wire rigs, creating cumulative damage to his lower back and spine. Hoskins developed severe back pain during production, but continued working because the shooting schedule was too tight, and replacing the lead actor mid-production would have been catastrophically expensive. He relied on painkillers and physical therapy between shoots to keep functioning. After filming wrapped, Hoskins required back surgery to address damage to his lumbar vertebrae. The recovery took months. He later told interviewers that the back problems from Roger Rabbit affected his ability to take certain physical roles for years afterward.
This is a killer. If this had gone on any longer, I think I'd have been in hospital.
Here's the painful cost. Hoskins gave a career-defining performance that made Roger Rabbit possible, and it required surgery to repair the damage. The role that audiences loved literally broke the actor's body in ways that required medical intervention. Disney's production insurance covered the surgery and recovery, but nothing could undo the fact that making a cartoon rabbit look real required a human actor to genuinely injure himself. Number 8. Steven Spielberg spent 7 years. Getting rejected before Disney finally agreed. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was Steven Spielberg's passion project that every studio in Hollywood rejected multiple times before Disney reluctantly agreed to make it. Spielberg discovered Gary K. Wolfe's novel, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, in 1981, immediately saw its film potential, bought the rights, and started the long, painful process of trying to convince studios it could work. The pitch seemed impossible. Mix film noir with Looney Tunes slapstick. Combine human actors with hand-drawn animation in every shot. Create a story where cartoon characters are real but oppressed. Budget estimates started at $50 million and climbed from there. Every studio said no. Spielberg pitched it to Disney in 1983. They passed. Warner Brothers passed. Universal, Paramount, everyone rejected it as too expensive and too technically risky. Spielberg commissioned script rewrites, brought in Robert Zemeckis as director, and kept pushing. He went back to Disney in 1985 with Zemeckis attached and more detailed technical plans. Disney executive Jeffrey Katzenberg was interested but skeptical. The negotiation took 2 more years, nearly collapsing multiple times over budget concerns, creative control, and merchandise rights. Finally, in 1987, they reached an agreement. Disney would finance and distribute. Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment would produce. Zemeckis would direct, with significant but not total creative control. Here's the vindication. The film that every studio rejected for 7 years as impossible and uncommercial became a massive critical and commercial hit that changed animation history. Number 7. ILM had to invent new camera technology that didn't exist. Who Framed Roger Rabbit's vision required cameras that could move freely through scenes while maintaining perfect mathematical precision for animation alignment later. The technology didn't exist in 1987, so Industrial Light and Magic had to invent it specifically for this one film. Traditional animation compositing used locked-down cameras on tripods because static cameras made it easier to align hand-drawn animation later. But Zemeckis wanted dynamic camera movement, tracking shots, pans, tilts, dolly moves, all while maintaining frame-perfect precision for animation integration. ILM developed a motion control system called the VistaGlide camera rig that could record every camera movement with mathematical precision, then reproduce those exact movements later when filming background plates and animation elements. The system used computer-controlled motors and encoded every pan, tilt, and movement digitally. This technology didn't exist before Roger Rabbit and had to be engineered from scratch. The research and development cost millions and took over a year. Disney and Amblin were funding technology development with no guarantee it would actually work for production needs. It barely worked. The VistaGlide was functional but temperamental, requiring constant calibration and maintenance. Technical breakdowns delayed shooting regularly, but it worked well enough to capture the shots Zemeckis needed. Here's the expensive legacy. Roger Rabbit didn't just cleverly use existing technology, it forced the invention of motion control systems that became standard for CGI integration in the 1990s. The camera technology developed for one film's impossible problem became the foundation for Jurassic Park, Terminator 2, and the entire modern VFX industry. Number 6. Kathleen Turner, voiced Jessica Rabbit, uncredited for scale pay. Jessica Rabbit's sultry, iconic voice belongs to Kathleen Turner, who recorded the dialogue for minimal pay and without screen credit. The arrangement was Disney's idea, and Turner later said she regretted agreeing to it. Turner was a major star in 1987, coming off Romancing the Stone and Preezy's Honor with a standard fee of over $1 million per film. Disney approached her to voice Jessica, but offered SAG scale rate.
That's the gun that killed R.K. Maroon. Doom pulled the trigger.
Doom!
I followed him to the studio, but I was too late to stop him.
Approximately $10,000 for a few days of recording work. The condition, no screen credit. Disney's reasoning was that crediting a major star would shift focus away from the technical achievement and create precedent for paying voice actors star rates. Turner agreed, partly because voice work sounded easy compared to live-action filming, and partly because the money was still decent for a few days' work. When Roger Rabbit became a massive hit and Jessica Rabbit became a cultural phenomenon, Turner's voice was instantly recognizable, but Disney's contract prevented her from confirming her involvement publicly or capitalizing on the character's popularity. Turner eventually confirmed her involvement in interviews years later, after the contractual restrictions expired. She told reporters she felt the uncredited arrangement had been a mistake and that she should have negotiated for credit and back-end participation. Here's the contract irony. Turner's voice made Jessica Rabbit iconic, but Disney's contract ensured she couldn't benefit from that success beyond her initial small paycheck. The actress who created one of cinema's most memorable characters was legally prevented from claiming her own work for years. Number 5. Every single shadow and light reflection was hand-painted frame by frame. The reason Roger Rabbit looks more real than other live-action/animation hybrids is lighting and shadows. The toon characters don't just exist in the physical space, they react to it. Real light sources create realistic shadows on the cartoon characters, and the characters themselves cast shadows on real objects and people.
Excuse me, I don't see a scene with fire.
Achieving this required inhuman amounts of manual labor. Animators had to hand-paint highlights, shadows, and lighting effects onto every single frame of animation based on the lighting conditions in the live-action plate. A character walking through a scene with changing light required analyzing each individual frame, determining how light would affect the character's surfaces, and painting those effects onto the cell. One 5-second shot could contain 120 frames of animation. Each frame needed individual lighting analysis and hand-painted adjustments. Multiply that across over 1,000 effect shots, and you're looking at hundreds of thousands of frames requiring manual lighting work. The shadow work was even more labor-intensive. Every toon character needed to cast realistic shadows onto the physical environment and onto human actors. This required painting shadow mats for each frame, adjusting opacity based on light source distance and angle, and compositing the shadows with the live-action plate. Animation director Richard Williams estimated the lighting and shadow work added approximately 8 months to the production schedule and required hiring 40 additional artists specifically for lighting duty. Here's the tedious truth. The seamless integration everyone praises was achieved through boring, repetitive labor that nobody notices when done correctly. The lighting that makes Roger feel real was painted by artists who spent months staring at individual frames, adjusting shadow density. Number 4. Disney and Spielberg killed the sequel. After a decade of development, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? 2 was in active development from 1989 to 2001, before Disney and Steven Spielberg finally killed it permanently over control disputes. The sequel had multiple completed scripts, character designs, preliminary animation tests, and both Zemeckis and Hoskins attached. The only problem was that Disney and Spielberg couldn't agree on who controlled the property. The original film's success gave both parties massive leverage. Disney owned distribution rights and the Roger Rabbit characters created for the film. Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment had producer rights per the original contract. Both sides wanted more control and a bigger percentage of the profits. Negotiations dragged through the 1990s. At least 5 different scripts were written and rejected. One version called Roger Rabbit, 2 Toon Platoon, would have sent Roger into World War II. Another called Who Discovered Roger Rabbit was a prequel. Test animation was produced for multiple versions and shelved when deals collapsed. The final breakdown came around 2001 when Spielberg demanded final cut approval and profit participation that Disney considered excessive. Spielberg walked away. Disney briefly considered making the sequel without Amblin involvement, but Robert Zemeckis refused to direct without Spielberg, and making Roger Rabbit without the original creative team felt like guaranteed failure. Here's the business tragedy. The collaboration that created a masterpiece couldn't survive its own success. Both parties wanted the sequel, but neither would compromise on control or money. The sequel that fans wanted for decades died because the people who made the original couldn't agree on how to split the profits from making another one. Number 3. The production nearly collapsed when 3 key animators quit simultaneously. In the middle of production, 3 of Richard Williams' top animators quit simultaneously over working conditions, nearly destroying the film's chances of meeting its theatrical release date. The walkout happened in late 1987, roughly halfway through the animation schedule, and created a crisis that almost shut down the entire London studio. The 3 animators, all senior artists with crucial responsibilities, had reached their breaking point with the 14-hour days, 6-day weeks, and Williams's increasingly demanding perfectionism. They submitted resignations together, knowing that losing 3 senior animators simultaneously would cripple production. Williams and Disney executives went into panic mode. Replacing 3 senior animators mid-production would require weeks of training new hires on the specific technical requirements of the film. Missing the summer 1988 release date would cost Disney millions in marketing commitments and theater bookings. Williams personally negotiated with the 3 animators, offering them reduced schedules, higher pay, and promises of better working conditions for the remaining crew. 2 of the 3 agreed to stay under the new terms. The 3rd left anyway, and Williams had to promote a junior animator to senior position immediately. The resolution forced Williams to restructure the production schedule and actually improve working conditions for the entire animation team. The 6-day weeks became 5-day weeks, with optional paid overtime for the 6th day. Here's the labor irony. The near collapse caused by animator rebellion actually improved working conditions for everyone else. The 3 animators who hit their limit forced systemic changes that made the rest of production more humane. Number 2. The Baby Herman cigar. Gag almost earned the film an R rating. Baby Herman appears in the opening Roger Rabbit cartoon, short smoking a cigar, and that one detail nearly destroyed the film's PG rating and threatened its commercial viability. The MPAA viewed the cigar as promoting tobacco use to children through a cartoon baby character, which violated their guidelines even in the context of satire. The opening cartoon deliberately parodies 1940s cartoons, where Baby Herman was a character type, complete with inappropriate adult behavior, played for laughs. The cigar was integral to the joke. Baby Herman appears to be an innocent baby on camera, but is actually a middle-aged toon actor who smokes between takes. The MPAA rating board initially indicated the film would receive a PG-13 or R rating unless the cigar was removed entirely. Disney executives panicked because an R rating would eliminate the family audience and kill the film commercially. Zemeckis and the producers argued that the cigar was satirizing old cartoons, not promoting smoking. They pointed out that Baby Herman explicitly shows the negative aspects of the behavior. The back-and-forth negotiation lasted weeks. The compromise: Baby Herman could keep the cigar in the opening cartoon, but Disney had to ensure the character appeared unsympathetic, and the cigar was glamorized. The MPAA granted PG rating, with the understanding that the smoking was clearly satirical. Here's the rating's absurdity. Judge Doom's body horror and the general violence got approved easily, but a satirical cigar in a cartoon baby's mouth nearly earned an R rating. The MPAA was more concerned about tobacco satire than melting faces. Number 1, Roger Rabbit won animation Oscars, but lost Best Picture because of cartoon prejudice. Who Framed Roger Rabbit won 4 Academy Awards in 1989. Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Visual Effects, and a Special Achievement Award for Animation Direction. But it wasn't even nominated for a Best Picture, despite being one of the year's biggest critical and commercial successes. The film earned widespread critical acclaim. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars. It grossed $329 million worldwide against a $70 million budget. It revolutionized filmmaking technology. But Academy voters didn't consider a movie with cartoon characters worthy of Best Picture consideration. Trade publications reported that Academy members privately dismissed Roger Rabbit as a cartoon, despite the fact that it was predominantly live action with animation composited in. The perception that cartoons were children's entertainment, not serious cinema, kept it out of the top category. The snub was particularly notable because 1988 was not a strong year for Best Picture contenders. Rain Man won, but the competition was considered relatively weak. Roger Rabbit's box office and critical reception exceeded most of the actual nominees, yet the Academy overlooked it entirely for the top prize. Here's the institutional bias. A film that won 4 Oscars for its technical achievements couldn't get nominated for Best Picture because Academy voters couldn't see past their prejudice against animation. The movie that proved cartoons and live action could create serious cinema was dismissed as just a cartoon. The technical revolution that changed filmmaking wasn't considered worthy of cinema's highest honor. And there you have it. 15 wild, weird facts about the movie that proved animation and live action could coexist, while nearly destroying everyone involved in making it happen. From Steven Spielberg's 7-year rejection tour, to Bob Hoskins punching himself in the face, to animators literally collapsing from exhaustion, to Disney recalling thousands of VHS tapes over Jessica's wardrobe malfunction, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a miracle held together by stubborn determination and expensive technology. Which fact shocked you most? Drop your answers in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of animation's greatest technical achievements, smash that like button and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories about the movies that defined our childhoods. We're covering everything from blockbusters to cult classics, and the weird facts never stop. Until next time.